Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is indeed Giles Brandreth, and if you're wondering why I am here this morning, then already we have something in common. Now, I am here this morning because the guest I'm about to introduce to you is somebody I have known for, wait for it, 60 years. I first encountered him when I was a small boy, and at my school, the headmaster said, we've got coming to this school a running coach. And this young man who's the running coach is the most remarkable running coach I have encountered in all my life as a teacher. And he introduced the running coach, who is running still 60 years later. This is a unique opportunity for you to encounter and indeed touch the most remarkable author on the planet, in that he is the only author in the history of authorship who has secured #1 bestsellers in fiction, I think about 20 times, for short stories, and for non-fiction, his Prison Diaries. No other author has ever managed that triple whammy before. So you are about to meet a unique talent. Is that somebody calling? Would you? No, it's okay. Would you explain to my wife, I'm going to Sainsbury's on the way back. I've remembered the list. It's bread, cheese, milk, and Marmite. Tell her I have not forgotten, okay?
Giles?
Yes?
Giles, before you introduce Geoffrey, we're going to ask the chair of the British Library to say a few words, and then you're going to bring Geoffrey up.
Oh, even more exciting.
Even more exciting.
Dame Carol is with us.
Yes.
This is, you are getting, I don't know, what have this crowd done to deserve all this luxury? You're going to have a lord in a moment. You've got a mere mortal like me. But meanwhile, would you please welcome the chairman, chief executive? She's the chairman.
The chair of the British Library.
The chair of the British Library. Here she is, Dame Carol. Isn't she beautiful and brilliant?
Well, thank you, Dad. Good morning. I'm here to give you the warmest possible welcome from the British Library on the second day of the festival. I've already started very well by going to the morning music, which was wonderful. This is an exceptional festival, and although I know it's not as large as the one in Jaipur, when you look at the programme, it is just quite remarkable, and we are indeed extremely proud to host it here at the British Library. The connection between Britain and South Asia are long, rich, and flourishing, and they span family and trading connections, and of course the arts and culture. And the library, as I'm sure you know, looks after some of the most significant collections of the region outside the subcontinent itself, and our work to share that much more widely with the world through digitalization is one of our most important programs at the moment, so that we hope that many, many more people worldwide will have the opportunity to explore our wonderful collection. So I don't think I need to say any more. I'm really looking forward to hearing Geoffrey, and I will let you get on with the really important business. But again, the warmest possible welcome to the library.
Thank you very much indeed, Dame Carol, who has been a triumph as our chair. And as you can see, one shouldn't make personal remarks now, but I have to say those spectacles and that frock are a fashion statement that we all admire and most of us envy. So we're thrilled that you are here. But most of all, ladies and gentlemen, may I tell you how thrilled I am to be introducing now to you, in my view, the world's great storyteller. Would you please salute Geoffrey Archer? Now, Geoffrey, we may not need these microphones, but we've got microphones if we want to use them. Do we need them? We'll see. I was telling them how 60 years ago you came to my school to teach us running. So perhaps, in case people don't know it, tell us the beginning of your story. Explain to us how, age 17, 18, 19, you were teaching at a school anyway. But where do you come from? Who is your family? What made you a storyteller? Take us right back to the beginning of your story.
I think it's interesting you use the word storyteller, because you're quite right. I am a storyteller, not a writer. I like to be both. But for me, the storytelling is the important side, which I think I got from my mother, who was a remarkable woman, who didn't have the advantages that young women have today. And in my recent trip to India, when I saw the next generation of young Indian women, I received very kindly, they gave me an honorary degree in Jaipur, and I got the women to stand up, the degree, 1,500 of them, and said, "You are the next generation." Because my mother didn't have the advantages that young Indian women have nowadays, in the sense that I went up to this charming head girl at this school and said, "Are you hoping to go to university?" And she said, "I'm going to Somerville in September." And I realized that there's a generation of Indian women now aged 18, 19, 20, 21, 20, are going to startle India. They haven't begun to realize. And when I got my honorary degree, I got it with the cabinet secretary, who was a man. I got it with the senior scientist from the university, who was a man. And I got it from a great politician who was a man. So when I left and they took me to my car, I took a man in charge and said, "You're in trouble. If there isn't a woman on stage next year getting an honorary degree, you're going to look more and more stupid. This country is going that direction." And the girls, I was very impressed by. My own background, I went to a little school in Somerset called Wellington. Very privileged to win a scholarship there because my parents had no money. In fact, my father died when I was 12, leaving debts of 500 pounds. Of 500 pounds, which my mother had to struggle to do 3 jobs. But the remarkable thing about, she worked on the local paper. She was a journalist on the local paper, had her own column, and she brought out a little thing called What's On in Weston-super-Mare, which wasn't a major triumph. And she worked in a hotel at the weekends to keep me at Wellington. I didn't know at the time, of course. I realized later and was able to repay her in I hope, fair way. But what I most admire about her is at the age of 52, she said, when she met my wife, Mary, I think Mary affected her in the sense that she thought, wow, I'd like to do the things Mary, I would like to have been born in Mary's generation and done those things. So she took an open university degree at the age of 52, which rather proves she could have done the things that Mary did. So I really admired that. I truly admired the fact she'd taken this degree at the age of 52. So from there, well, I've always wanted to be a politician, first and foremost.
So when you were at school, you hoped to be a politician?
Certainly at Oxford.
So, but take it to school, when you're a schoolboy, your mother is devoted, you can see that, you love her. But at school, what sort of a child are you?
Well, I wanted to be in the Olympic
Yeah.
the Olympic team, most of all. I wanted to run for my country, which I had the privilege of doing. But as soon as I got to Oxford, I wanted to be a politician.
But we haven't got there yet.
Right.
You mustn't rush me through this story, because I'm determined to get at it. You're at school, you're going to be a runner, and you are a good runner. And then between school and going to university, what do you do?
Oh, hodgepodge of things.
That's how you end up teaching at my school. That's
yes.
the point.
One of the things was teaching for
for
however many months, before going up. Yeah, I think, dare I say it, my generation, almost more than yours, Giles, because you're a clear generation behind me.
In case that wasn't obvious. It's the lovely oil of Olay that I apply.
When I see my children and my grandchildren, I realize we didn't do any work at all. We were a bunch of blooming layabouts. The idea of going to university we were just lazy. And it wasn't that we were badly taught. I love my English master, Alan Quilter, who changed my whole life. He gave me my love of Shakespeare. He gave me my love of literature. Went on himself to become headmaster of Wells Cathedral School. And indeed, one of the books is dedicated to him. So I had a love of education and language. I just wasn't well educated. I mean, what it says in Who's Who is right. Educated by my wife since leaving Wellington School, Somerset, and Brasenose College, Oxford. I'm afraid that's the truth. You live with Mary we've been married 53 years now. You're either going to get divorced or better educated. One of the two.
So you leave school, your ambition is ultimately to run for your country and to be a prime minister, aged 18 or 19, in your head.
I thought I might be prime minister a little later than 18 or 19.
No, but that was your ultimate ambition. There may be people in the room today who wish that you were prime minister.
Well.
Who knows? And it's a possibility. And there you are. I mean, I'll be tweeting that later. Round of applause when I suggest that Jeffrey Archer throws his hat into the ring.
What a ring.
So, here you are as a teenager, and you are running. How do you get to Oxford? I mean, you're going to teach.
Well, I wanted to teach in those days. I was determined to teach. And very kindly, the headmaster of Dover College wrote to Mr. Peterson, who was the head of the education department, and said, I saw the letter. He said, "We've got a very unusual, exceptional man. You should take him." And they did. They were very kind.
Can you identify, well, this is what intrigues me about Geoffrey, is that, bear in mind, we're talking about 60 years ago. I am 10 years of age, and I'm being told by my headmaster, you're going to meet this remarkable human being who is the most remarkable running coach I have ever encountered in a lifetime of teaching. This is Ivor Burton who said this to us boys. Yeah. And you appeared. Now, the point I'm trying to make is that you were clearly remarkable, aged 18, and you appeared remarkable to a man who must have been 60 then. So what was it in you that made you this sort of a person?
I don't know, and honestly didn't even give it any thought at that time. I was certainly an innovator. I remember something that I did at your school that they'd banned me from teaching for now. I wanted your school to win the cross-country against every other school. I wasn't interested in losing. And so I made the boys run in bare feet.
Oh.
So when they put shoes on and ran against other schools, they just walked all over them. But I realize now if I said to boys, if I went into a boys' school now and said, you must run in bare feet, they'd throw me out. They wouldn't allow it. All the different bodies wouldn't allow it. So, and I love that period. I love young kids. I have to tell you, in India, because by the way, where's the leader of our group? I mean, I had 7,500 people come to see me in Jaipur. India must be playing cricket today. When I was in India, I saw those young kids of 6, 7, 8, and I met the headmistress. She was as good as anything that ever taught me. She was wonderful, wonderful. Still, so yes, I like teaching, and I thought I was going to be a teacher. But then if I look at my generation at Oxford and saw who was going into politics, I decided that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to go into politics, and indeed, God knows how, got into the House at the age of 29. Was sitting on the green benches. And indeed, I told you very firmly you should go in the House of Commons.
You did, at that time?
I said, stop wearing those silly sweaters and go into the House of Commons. You've got a lot to offer.
I used to wear colourful jumpers, for those that don't know, in the 1970s.
Famous for his colourful jumpers. And I said, now stop it, Charles. You're far too bright for that.
You've already used the phrase, I think, that gives the whole game away, is I wasn't interested in losing.
Well,
You said that about,
yeah.
So already in your 20s, you were determined to win. You won the seat. It was all going rather swimmingly. And I remember meeting you then. You had an office in Whitehall.
Yeah.
The building was actually called, this is before you'd written a word, Arrow House, wasn't it?
Yes. Well remembered, Charles.
I do remember. And even then, his telephone number, even in the 1970s, included the digits 007.
Still does.
Because you had a bit of a James Bond thing going, didn't you?
Well, that's our generation, isn't it? We're Beatles and James Bond.
Because I think I'm right in saying, I remember there was Sean Connery, there was Roger Moore.
God bless him.
Absolutely. But God, what a charming man. And in many ways, my favourite 007.
Lovely
man. He
man.
didn't take it too seriously. But
He didn't take himself seriously.
No, and they were so delightful for that reason.
Yeah.
So there you are, this hugely ambitious person. I'm not interested in losing. You're a member of Parliament, actually set on possibly becoming Prime Minister, who knows? And then it all went wrong. And indeed, it's going wrong is what subsequently made everything go right. Explain to us how it went wrong.
Well, I think my lack of education, and I think my lack of having a father, and coming from a family that was penniless and thinking I was quite bright, all worked against me in the sense that, and to quote you earlier when we were having a private discussion on the leadership problem, you said you thought Rory Stewart was naive. I was unquestionably naive. And the Bank of Boston, they couldn't get away with it today, just like my shoes for the children, they couldn't get away with it. The Bank of Boston advised me to invest in a company called Aquablast. I put £200,000 in. I borrowed another 200,000, so I'd got 400,000 in, and it turned to be run by a crook. And I did that on the advice of the Bank of Boston. Now, if they did it today on the advice of the Bank of Boston, they'd have had to give me my money back, no doubt. They just pretended they hadn't met me. The vice president pretended I didn't exist. So I was facing bankruptcy. And I sat down and wrote, not a penny more, not a penny less.
Explain also, when you're facing bankruptcy, you cannot be a member of parliament
Correct.
and be a bankrupt.
Correct.
So you were obliged to resign your seat.
I thought it was the wisest thing. No, I didn't resign. Luckily, a general election was 6 months away.
And you didn't stand.
So I didn't stand at the next election. So luckily, I didn't do the Chiltern Hundreds. No, that was lucky. And because of the books, heaven knows, I must say to people, you've got to be pretty naive and pretty stupid to think that writing a book will get you out of your financial problems. I mean, how stupid can you be? And indeed, the first book, Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less, made £3,000. And when you're in debt for 400,000, it doesn't make a very big dent. So I was living off Mary, who then moved from Oxford to Cambridge. And she started teaching. She was the first woman ever to teach at Trinity, Cambridge. And we lived off her. And they gave us a lovely little flat. And Mary said, isn't it time you got a proper job? So I thought, I'll have another go. And I wrote Cain and Abel. And she hasn't been suggesting I get another job since.
The way he describes this, he makes it sound like a very smooth transition. You know, I was a member of parliament. Then that didn't quite work out, so I just wrote a novel. But in fact, I remember at the time how fraught you were before you decided to write the novel. I remember, for example, LBC, the first commercial radio station, had just started in London. And I remember meeting you at King's Cross Station. You'd come from somewhere. And you were going to do the overnight, sitting in,
Literally,
doing
3 o'clock
overnight
in the morning.
on the local radio to make ends meet.
Yes.
And then you thought, well, at least I've had this experience of Aquablast. Maybe I can turn this into a story. And that's how wasn't that what inspired you?
That's the basis of Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. 4 young men who between them lose a fortune. One of them gathers the 4 together because they don't know each other, and they decide to steal it back. Not a penny more, not a penny less. That was the basis of the first book. That sold, I keep reading now in the press, it was an instant success. Overnight, the world was reading him. It sold 3,000 copies. Worldwide, it sold 3,000 copies. Then it went into paperback, and it sold 25,000 in the first month. So I rang up my publishers and said, are you going to publish another 25,000? And they said, no, it doesn't work like that, Geoffrey. No, you write another book. I said, no, you publish another 25,000. No, they said, we don't do that. Yes, I said, you publish another 25,000. So they published another 25,000, and they sold them in a month. So I said, well, are you going to publish another 25,000? No, they said, yes, I said, no, yes, and they published another 25,000. Last month, they published another 25,000.
Oh.
I've sold, no. It's now sold 27,775,000 copies. No. And I still have to ring them every month.
So the first one happens, and then Cain and Abel happens. And Cain and Abel is what transforms your life, isn't it?
It's 40 years old this year. It's on its 112th reprint. It sold 32,700,000 copies. It's been read by 100 million people. In the all-time list of books in the history of the world, novels, it's 11th.
Well done.
One behind. No, I don't understand it. I still don't understand it. It sold 400,000 copies last year. I still don't understand it. but it just goes on and on and on. It's one behind To Kill a Mockingbird, and it's one ahead of War and Peace.
Yay! The Tolstoy of our times. Yeah, well done.
Now, it's interesting you say that in your semi-sarcastic, above-the-world, intellectual guardian-type way. If I had a choice between writing Cain and Abel or War and Peace, I'd still rather have written Cain and Abel. So stuff off, Giles.
So, you've rewritten it, though, haven't you? Because for the 40th anniversary, didn't you tinker with it? Didn't you
Yes, I
do a new
did.
edition? Now, explain how that works.
Well, 20 years ago, I thought, wait a moment, they're still buying it. It's still going on. So I took it away for 6 months and did a rewrite. And the amazing thing about the rewrite, the story did not change one iota, but it dropped 8,000 words. Oh. So it went from about 250,000 to 242,000. So it dropped 3%, 4%. I think the truth is, it's about writing, about anything you do, the truth is, I'm a better craftsman, not a better storyteller, because storytelling is a God-given gift. You cannot pop down. I had an Indian lady once. She must have been journalist, about 30. She came into this room with me and she said, I want to interview you. But first of all, I want to know, where do you get the stories? So I said, well, actually, it's a God-given gift. I'm just very fortunate, very lucky. It's the way it is. No, no, she said. I won't tell anyone. You just tell me where you get the stories. I said, no, I promise you, I'm just lucky. They come every day. I don't know where they come from. It's a gift. No, I promise you, the door is locked. I am not going to tell. All right, I said. I live in Grantchester in Cambridge. And at the end of our home is a river. And I walk down when no one's looking at 5 o'clock in the morning. And I dig a hole in this particular place. And there at the bottom of the hole, there's a bunch of stories. She ran out of the room livid. The truth is, it's a God. I can do Once Upon a Time and give you a story now. I don't know why. I'm not a ballet dancer. I'm not an opera singer. You know what? I don't do what Carol does as a great academic. We all have our own things. And I don't know why. And your point is well made, Giles. If I hadn't nearly faced bankruptcy, I would have ended up as Under-Secretary of State for Transport and never known that I could write a book. Yeah. I would never have known. Proust said...
Oh, Proust. Exactly.
Proust said...
I'm not allowed to mention Tolstoy, but he can bring up Proust.
We all end up doing the thing we're second best at.
Oh.
Isn't that frightening?
Oh, it is a bit frightening.
It'll make you think too.
It will.
It will, actually, because you are in disgrace. Your problem, if I may say so, in front of this distinguished gathering, is your problem, and I've had it out with you several times, is you're multi-talented. Yeah. And you've never found the one thing that would make all the difference. You can do 10 things.
You're very sweet. He discussed this with my mother many years ago.
Yes.
I remember him bullying my mother. She was backing into the corner while he was saying, now look, you've got to sort your son out. Anyway. But when you revised Cain and Abel, did you find also, rereading, for example, Ian Fleming, there's a lot of Ian Fleming written in the 50s and 60s that now would be unacceptable, that he would want to revise because of casual misogyny,
nigger. In the Graham Greene books, he's Jewish.
Exactly.
Turns
of phrase
in the Graham Greene books, and Graham Greene is a great writer. You get all these phrases, and I'm sure they're in Ian Fleming as well.
Did you have to change things for political correctness?
Less so, because it's a fair point. Less so because by 1980, a lot of it had gone. But you're quite right. What I find from my readers is they're a bit fed up with being totally 100%, 1,000,000% politically correct. They're a bit fed up with having to keep to a line that they get a bit, and there was the most beautiful black girl in the House of Lords yesterday, dining with a very distinguished black member of the House of Lords. And I said to him, teasing him, nice to see you with your granddaughter. And he took it with a smile. And she said, oh, God, it's lovely that someone flirts with me. And I said, I beg your pardon. She said, nobody flirts nowadays. I said, well, Me Too would be after me. I think, actually, I think Me Three are after me, to be honest. And what she revealed, quite honestly, was she was fed up with it. She was an attractive, I'm guessing, 40-year-old woman, and nobody flirts with her. She's fed up with it. So the answer to your question is that if that's in the books, I have a tendency to be quite happy that it is there, because that is what happened when I wrote the Clifton Chronicles. I wrote them between 1945 and up to the present, well, 2000, the year 2000. I hope it reflected those years. So I'm not going to start doing things that are now unacceptable. I have to tell you, the worst was a couple of years ago in Washington. Beautiful girl heading towards me in the National Gallery, because I'm an art freak. I opened the door for her, and she said, you don't have to do that. And I thought, what age are we living in? My mother would have killed me if I hadn't done it.
Yeah. Oh, well, at least you proved that you could open a door at your age. I mean, I think that's quite impressive.
He's so jealous. I'm nearly 80. He's so jealous. And I've got all my hair.
Oh! You've told us that, as it were, the storytelling is a God-given gift. You mentioned craftsmanship. Tell us a little bit about the craft. How do you set about, what is your working routine? How do you set about writing? You've got a new one coming out in September. This is a self-contained novel?
Yes. Oh, and the latest, no.
Yeah.
Hedge You Win is. Hedge You Win is. I rise at 5:30 in the morning. Oh. I work in 4 splits of 2 hours. I work 6 to 8, 10 to 12, 2 to 4, 6 to 8. I go to bed, I have a light supper, go to bed about 9:30, 10, up again at 5:30. First draft will take me 30 days, 35 days, about 300 hours, 2-week break. I go into what I call the fourth draft, because I do each one. Every word handwritten on what's called an Oxford pad with a felt-tip pen. And it's a routine I like. I think all authors like a routine, and that's mine. I've never got over the Irishman at Trinity, Dublin, who came up to me and said, you ruined my life. I said, I beg your pardon. He said, you ruined my life. I was going to write the great Irish novel this weekend. And they don't realize, a lot of them don't realize. So when people come to see me, young people in particular, and they say, Geoffrey, I want to be a novelist. I say, go to the ballet. And they say, what? I say, go to the ballet. Go to the Bolshoi. I want you to see the prima ballerina on the stage. And I want you to imagine how many hours she's done to become the prima ballerina. Then I want you to look at the chorus behind. And I want you to think how many hours they've done just to be on the stage. Then I want you to think about the thousands of girls who would love to be on the stage. It's just as hard to be #1 on the New York Times bestsellers list. Go away and work. It's damned hard work. But if you're willing to combine that, and you're lucky enough to have a talent, whether you're a singer, whether you're a dancer, whatever it may be, you still need the hard work. When I talk to schools, I say, if you have energy plus talent, you're a king. If you have energy and no talent, you can still be a prince. If you have talent but no energy, you'll be a pauper.
So it's the energy, the determination.
It's the energy is a God-given gift. You can't go down to Marks and Spencer's and say, I'd like a packet of energy, please. It doesn't work that way. You've either got it or you haven't. But if you if you look at anyone in history who you admire. Margaret Thatcher, who we both worked for and admired, what energy, what incredible energy. If you look at Picasso, who I greatly admire, what energy. Almost anyone in any field, that is the factor that divides them from other people.
And self-belief, those two examples you've just given also, being convinced that what they're doing is worthwhile.
Yes, I've recently been reading Winston Churchill's First World War memoirs, and had forgotten, if I ever knew, how down he was, how broken he was, how finished he was. But he still believed he'd be Prime Minister. He still believed his moment in history would come. And we can learn a lot from that, because you couldn't be further down than he was.
Sticking with the craft for a moment, I went to see a play by Ibsen this week, which is on...
Rave reviews.
Rave reviews. It's last week, Rosmer's Home. It isn't often done. I recommend it. Anyway, Ibsen, I know that when he wrote a play, he spent about a year thinking through the plot. I mean, literally a year, walking every day, thinking through each of the characters and devising the plot. It took him a long time, and then he spent a year writing it, and he's created masterpieces. Do you think of the story before you begin, or the outline of it, or do you think of it as you go along? What is the storytelling process? How do you devise the plots?
I'm the exact opposite. I get up in the morning, I pray that I'll get 3 pages, and the ideas just come and come and come. So in that way, I'm very lucky. And the good thing about that is you can't be sure where they'll come or where they'll go. That's the other thing. If you know exactly, if you've got it plotted out from beginning to end before you sit down, you sort of go in that direction. I never know where I'm going. I've only had one major problem in 24 books, is that I was taught by taught's the right word. My editor at Simon & Schuster in the United States was a man called Corliss Smith, a legend. I mean, one of the great, they don't make great editors any longer. It's not a proper job in that sense. He was a legend. I mean, J.D. Salinger, he edited J.D. Salinger. So when I sat with him, I called him Sir. I mean, he was truly remarkable. And I remember one thing he taught me. I remember so much he taught me, because he edited Cain and Abel. And I'll tell you a great story about that in a moment. But he edited Cain and Abel. And he said, Geoffrey, when you get in a corner, don't try and make it easy to get out. Make it more difficult. Because then your reader will be shocked. Your reader will say, how is he going to get out of that? And sometimes, and I've just completed a book where the ending is that. And I've got a year to work out how the hell to get out of that problem. But to give you an idea of this man's genius, he was a drunk. He drank gin and tonics at lunch, and we couldn't work in the afternoon. And the publishing chairman said to me, Geoffrey, work flat out from 9 till 12. Remember the page you got to, and then start again at 9 the next morning, which I did. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't have interesting things to say in the afternoon, but he wasn't any longer truly coherent. Where the brain in the morning was a privilege to be with. It was like having a tutorial. But I'll tell you how good he is, just to give you an example of what a great editor can do. When I first wrote Cain and Abel, and the Americans had paid $3,200,000 for it 40 years ago. So we got a clue that it might do quite well, but we'll come to that in a moment. He said to me, and I'd sent it, the first original Cain and Abel had 120 pages of Abel and then 120 pages of Cain. And he said to me, he rang me, I'd never met him, and he came on the line, he said, Geoffrey, when I read about Abel, I didn't want to meet Cain. I wasn't interested. When I finished Cain, I never wanted to see Abel again in my life. Well, sir, I said, what do I do? He said, Geoffrey, I'll tell you exactly what you do. All the words are there. It's a craftsmanship job. I want 4 pages of Cain, 4 pages of Abel. 8 pages of Cain, 8 pages of Abel. 20 pages of Cain, 20 pages of Abel. 30 pages of Cain, 30 pages of Abel, and they meet. Now, that's brilliant editing. All the words were there. I didn't spot it. He spotted it immediately. And I know how good his idea was, because Simon & Schuster used to say, God, you'll be surprised how many books we're getting, Geoffrey, which are 10 pages of one. And they all began to copy it, and it wasn't my idea. And he was he was just brilliant. He made you, I remember he taught me another thing too. If you're going to give a big clue to your readers, he was wearing a checked coat to carry, hello, we all know it's Giles. You must throw in a sentence immediately after the sentence that gives it away that is devastating. The fire began at the back of the hall.
Oh my God.
They've forgotten you. And that's something he taught me. Give them the clue honorably, but then take their mind off it in a totally different direction. And then when they get to the end of the book, they'll say, oh my God, he told me on page 73 and I missed it. They didn't miss it. Corlys Smith had taught me how to take your mind away from it. Editors of, and I said to the great man, after we did 6 books together, I said to the great man, who tragically died after that, I said to him, what's the difference between a great author and a great editor? And he looked me in the eye and said, the first draft.
Oh, well done. How did you get into short stories?
My problem traveling all around the world and meeting fascinating people, and indeed one of the best stories I've ever written, I picked up in India, is people tell you stories. And they think they've got the most important story the world has ever known. If you wrote my life story, Geoffrey, it would be one of the world's bestsellers. I mean, that's once a week. But they've often got a genuine short story, which is devastating, and is good for 10 or 15 pages maximum. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you 2, because I'll give you the Indian one later. When I was in New Zealand, this crotchety old man facing me said, I've got a story for you, Geoffrey. I said, right, here we go. I can't be rude. He's 103. I can't be rude. I'll sit and listen. He said, you know, when I got to 100, the Queen sent me a telegram. I thought, yeah, we all know that. Boring. Next, I'll drink my water. He said, yes, but I wanted to live long enough for my wife, who was 96, 97, to reach 100, so that we could celebrate together and both have the Queen's telegram. So I said, yes, how very interesting. He said, yes, well, when she got to 100, she didn't get the telegram.
Oh,
I said. So one day when she was out shopping, I was very brave. I rang the palace. I knew they'd have someone, and they put me through to this department and said, tell me your name. My name is Mr. Smith, whatever it was. He said, we're looking at, yes, you were 100 3 years ago, weren't you? Yes, and I'm not complaining, he said. I'm just feel for my wife because she hasn't had her telegram from the Queen, and she's 100 this year. Oh, I'm so sorry, said the man, flicking through the files. She had it 6 years ago.
Oh!
You, the audience, have revealed the genius of that story. I get hundreds that are useless, but that was a piece of magic.
Yeah.
It was a comment on men and women and age and so many things. And it's one of my short stories. So, and the Indian one was more tragic. I was in Mumbai, and the senior literary editor of the Indian Times, a very distinguished lady, had invited me to. Actually, I'd remembered that you'd love this. I said to her, who should I be reading? I wish to learn. I wish to improve all the time. Who should I be reading? And she said a wonderful sentence I've never forgotten. Forget the sacred cows of India and read R.K. Narayan. Oh, he's wonderful. R.K. Narayan is wonderful. Should have had the Nobel Prize. Wonderful. Still, she invites me to dinner, and we're at a large circular table of 10 people. And I am sitting next to this stunning, beautiful 40-year-old. I'm sitting there. And her husband is sitting opposite, and he is devastatingly good looking. I later learn Harvard, son of a Maharaja, the whole thing. But he is And he's also witty. And he can see I'm flirting with his wife. See. And so I'm having it's a great evening. And I'm on the other side is this very distinguished critic from the Indian Times. So we get up to leave at the end of the meal. And he's in a wheelchair. Oh. And I said to her, "Is there a story?" And she said, "Yes, there is." Wow. And it's one of the most dramatic short stories I've ever written, how he ended up in a wheelchair. And readers write to me from all over the world saying it brings them to tears. It's called Cast Off, because she was a lower caste and not allowed. They met at Princeton. She was pretty bright, but he was the son of a Maharaja. So no, as she used to say, no rose petals at our wedding. But the story itself, which I'm not going to tell you now, is tragic. And we've remained close friends ever since. We've now been friends for 30 years. And he's a director of Tata. He's a director of the Tata company.
Well, this will possibly intrigue you, because I, some years ago, interviewed the Queen of Denmark. I used to interview the great and the good. A beautiful lady, the Queen of Denmark. And I said, "What advice did you get from your father?" Because I think her father abdicated and knew that she would become the Queen of Denmark many years ago. And she'd been Queen of Denmark. Margarita, Queen Margarita. And she said, "My father told me that I could spend my life as queen. I'd meet many, many people, and I could find them boring, and that I could sit back and just let it all wash over me. Or every day I'd meet different people, sit next to a different person at a banquet. I could lean forward and listen to them and try to find out from them the one interesting story in their lives. And everybody's got one interesting story." And she said to me, "I've never had a dull day as queen, because I'm out there finding out the interesting stories." So,
lovely lady, lovely. I sat next to her by mistake. There was the King of Greece had a party for his 21st, son's 21st. And Mary and I read that to you because it's a good story here. The only reason that is, we were stuck and we were waiting, and Her Majesty was there. She was one of the guests. So I was on the far side of a ballroom and wanted to go home because I'm a 10 o'clock man, and Mary doesn't like late either. So it's about 11 and we want to go home. And the ballroom is there and we're waiting and we're waiting. And I said to this rather pompous looking official, rather nice man actually, I said, "When can I leave?" And he said, "You may leave when Her Majesty has left," meaning the Queen, your Queen. "When your monarch has left, you may leave." Fine. How do I get out? The quickest route would be straight across the ballroom and then turn left. And then you'll be out of the door. "But could I warn you, my lord, could I just warn you and say, should anyone speak to you, I would advise you to bow and say, 'Good evening, Your Majesty.'" We're about the only plebs there.
have you considered writing your own story? Because your non-fiction, as I mentioned in the introduction, your Prison Diaries, also #1 bestseller, and many people found them completely gripping. I certainly did. My wife did 3 volumes of them. So you can you have written about yourself. Have you thought of writing about the roller coaster that has been your life?
I think I might if I didn't keep getting ideas. You see, I wrote the Clifton Chronicles, 7 books in a row.
Which was going to be 6, and you couldn't stop.
Well, at the end of the 5th book, Giles was only 40. Harry was only 40. Emma was at 38. So I went back to the publishers and said, "I've either got to kill them all in a car crash, or you're getting 2 more books. 2 more books, please." But then I started getting letters from all over the world saying, "We love Harry Clifton, we'd like more." And I said, "Look, he's dead. I killed him." And they said, "But he was a writer himself," because I based Harry Clifton on myself. And he was a detective writer, and he wrote about William Warwick, who was the son of a very distinguished QC, but he wanted to go into the London police. And the distinguished QC wanted him to join him in chambers and become pupillage and all that sort of stuff. And I got letters saying, "We want to know more about him." So I've just begun a series, which will be, according to how long I live, I joke not, because he starts life as Constable Warwick. He then becomes Detective Sergeant Warwick. He then becomes Inspector Warwick. He then becomes Chief Inspector Warwick. He then becomes Superintendent Warwick. He then becomes Commander Warwick. He then becomes the Commissioner. And I'll have to live to 88 in order to hand in the last book, please. So the answer to your question, Giles, is while I've still got ideas and while I'm still determined to get out there and be read, because I just want to be read. I don't do it for any other reason.
Do you want to be seen as well? Would you find it exciting if, say, the Clifton Chronicles became a
Oh,
television?
yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes,
Have you been to
please.
see Netflix about it?
I bet everybody's been to see Netflix about it, and all my books. Cain and Abel's coming out of copyright from Sonny in...
They bought an option.
They bought the option. No, they made the film,
Yeah.
and they owned it for
Yeah.
another 25 years, whatever it is. And it's come out now, and they're talking about remaking it. So much luck involved in you getting a series or a book turned into television. Some people get it, some people don't. And you can look at some very distinguished authors who've had no luck at all. No, I battle on hoping that the Clifton Chronicles will be on screen, yes. And Cain and Abel again. And probably A Prisoner of Birth, people still think A Prisoner of Birth, the readers still think A Prisoner of Birth is the best thing I've ever written. So that as well.
I had an amusing experience. I write detective stories featuring Oscar Wilde and Arthur Conan Doyle. The great Sherlock Holmes is my detectives. And Stephen Fry acquired the rights, bought the rights to this. And much excitement as Stephen Fry and I went around the great studios of the world, from Netflix, Walt Disney, Fox.
You did the route.
And what I discovered at the end of it, when nothing happened, was that people were just excited to meet Stephen Fry.
Yeah.
So that's why the meetings happened.
Yeah.
And nobody was vaguely interested in my stories at all.
They're laughing, but
it's-
laughter always tells you the truth. That's too near the truth.
We've got 5 minutes for some questions. This is your opportunity. Yes, look, there's somebody so eager here.
Sir.
If it's money you're wanting to borrow, that we'll deal with separately afterwards. Gentleman here, tell us your name too and where you come from. And
I can't hear you, sorry, I'm deaf. And actually, it doesn't sound as if it's on.
yeah,
Wake them up at the back. Hello, at the back.
Hello. Can you hear me now?
yeah.
Ah, now we can. Thank you very much.
Very frank exchange. I really enjoyed
You may
it.
have to
I've got a couple of questions which I like to roll up.
Now, can I point out the Indians speak all Indians speak because they're a gentle race. They speak very softly. It's something I've noticed over the years. And I'm slightly deaf, sir, so could if
He
Okay.
calls himself
Can you hear
Sergeant-
me now?
Yeah.
speak up.
It's a hard-hitting question, so good, right? Here it goes. I've enjoyed the talk.
No, you don't have to be slow. I'm not stupid. I'm
Okay,
deaf.
fine. Okay, I'll get straight to the point.
Get to the point.
You were veering on double standards, and I thought you were going to allude to some double standards, either in the characters that you've written or in your own life, but you didn't quite touch that. And I was just curious to know if you wanted to elaborate, whatever. In your story, no,
We got that, we
just
got
one
that.
second, just 1 second. So that's one aspect of the question. The
I'm
second-
not deaf, by the way.
The
That's okay.
second aspect is storytelling. You said that ideas come to you, and I'm sure that's true, and it comes to a lot of people. How do you filter those ideas is my question. And the third question...
Yeah,
And
we've got it.
And the last part is a contradiction. You said that the first draft takes you 30 days, and you're still saying that at the age of 80, to go to 88 will take you 8 years or whatever to complete that. So if you can just reconcile those three things. it'd be helpful.
So double standards in your life and in the characters you write about. You write about human beings, and therefore there will be complications, I would have thought. That was the first question. The second question was the filter. Lots of ideas come into your head. How do you decide I'm actually going to use this? Yeah. And then, are you frankly going to be able to make it to 88? That seems to be the question. And if not, this guy seems to know enough that he could do it for you.
I think I always advise people when they come to see me to write about experiences you've had. So I write about politics. I write about art. I write about big business a bit. I write about ambition. And the Indian race are the most ambitious race I've ever met, which is probably why I sell more books in India than anywhere else. I never met a human being who was perfect, so I've made mistakes. I write about them as well. Though I've never taken cocaine.
Oh.
I missed out there. It
So
could be the running.
It means you're not eligible.
The running.
Because they've all...
Can't even
Yeah.
join in. And
Yeah.
the second part was the filtering.
Yes.
Do you know, I don't know, sir. I sit down. He walked into the room and saw the faces staring at him. It wasn't until he'd been there for 20 minutes that he noticed her. She was wearing white on the end of the row. He wondered if he would ever meet her. Would she come to the signing? Would she just go immediately? How could he stop that? Now, it just comes every moment
Yeah.
of my life. I can't stop it.
Well, the one bit we do know, she'll be about 40, given what you've been telling us earlier. Okay.
And the third part,
Oh, yes. The third part was I didn't quite...
I will live to 88.
Yeah, he will live.
I
to it.
will.
I can assure
Please.
you, even without drugs, he also no. But you're a very determined person. I mean, one of the secrets of your success is you just keep going. You begin here, you end there. Whatever happens, you will be there. Determination is everything. You've set yourself. I think you probably set yourself these 8 ranks in order to ensure that you do live to that age.
Bit of truth in that.
And
Bit of
probably the
truth in
year
that.
before, you'll say, well, I've just had an idea for some short stories. I'll sign up for that as well to get you to 90.
Yes.
And then it would be
Yes.
wonderful to
Bit
be the
of truth in
first author in the world have a #1 bestseller on the New York Times list on his 100th birthday. Yay! That's what we want. We have time for, yes, state your age, please, and then we can ask her.
And whether you take cocaine.
Sorry.
Oh.
I'm absolutely in awe. I've read you all my life, I think. But my question to you is that
You say all your life is very frightening.
yes, pretty much. And I think that I will pack a Jeffrey Archer if I'm going on holiday to sit on the beach.
Yeah.
I would love to know what you read. Who do you find fascinating to pack into your bag?
Well, I came to my favorite author at the age of 60. I've always loved from a young age, I would love Dumas, because I think The Count of Monte Cristo is a masterpiece. He wasn't a great writer, but he was a great storyteller. And the fact that he wrote The Count of Monte Cristo and The Three Musketeers in the same year gives you a clue of how hard he worked. Of course, there was no television, there was no distractions, there was no tweets and so on, but he wrote those 2 books in the same year. So I love storytellers. So I love your own R.K. Narayan. I think Moguldi Days is a masterpiece. But at the age of 60, I came across, which I should have got to a lot earlier, I came across Stefan Zweig and Beware of Pity, which I think truly is one of the great novels of history. Beautifully written. I've learnt, at 60, I was learning from it. And he's a beautiful storyteller as well, that weird combination. And a very strange man. Committed suicide, only wrote 2 novels, thought Hitler was going to win, that the world was finished. But he wrote several short stories. But and many people feel his non-fiction is even more brilliant than his fiction. So I came to him late. This year, so I read all the time, non-stop. I thought The Tattooist of Auschwitz was quite remarkable. A really, really good story. And A Gentleman in Moscow, I thought was genuinely original. Not often you read an original story. And I thought A Gentleman in Moscow was original. And I remember once, it flashes into my mind now, I went to Hatchards when the great Peter Giddy ran Hatchards. And he said, you know, Geoffrey, Cain and Abel will be on the bestsellers list for 100 years. I said, that's very flattering. He said, but Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less is genuinely original. Cain and Abel is a theme that's been done, planted, honed, and watered. But Not a Penny More, Not a Penny Less. And he believed it so much that in Hatchards, when he was there, It was number 10 on his little chart of bestsellers for 20 years. Of course it wasn't number 10 for 20 years. He just loved it that much. That points to a tiny thing, how much someone can influence your whole life or change your life. Because he believed that. That certainly helped the sales. Now, on the age thing, I'll tell you a story. Because I'm honored to hear you've been reading me. And in India, that means you started at the age of 8. I do auctions. I do charity auctions as a fun. That's my hobby. I do charity auctions. And I did one recently for the Lord Mayor at the Mansion House. And the new Lord Mayor came up to me and said, "Wow, will you do our auction next year?" I said, "I'd be honored to, Lord Mayor. How very kind of you to ask me." He said, I will be Lord Mayor next year, and I'd like you to do mine in the Guildhall. I said, "I'd be honored." And he said, "Would you give my best wishes to your son, James?" And I said, "Yes." "How do you know James?" "We were at school together."
And he's now the Lord Mayor. Yes. You know you're the same age as the Pope. One last question. Oh, look, there's so many. Yes, maybe from the front row.
And then we'll do one more after that.
Yeah,
Charles.
why not?
Thank you so much. I'm really enjoying
Very
it.
kind, sir. Thank you.
Just one last question. Has your encounters with the law and order changed you, as a person, and in which way, if yes?
Have your encounters with the law and order changed you as a person, and in what way?
I think it can't harm an author to meet different people. And now I remember where I met you.
Very good. Very good.
But yes, I think, that's the great thing about politics, about anything in life. If you meet different people, you get a feel for their way of life. And I realize how very privileged I've been. I come from what we would have called in my days, doesn't exist now, lower middle-class family in Weston-super-Mare in Somerset. And to use Giles's words, I've fought my way to where I am and met a lot of people on the way. I've met bad people, I've met good people, I've met all right people, I've met stupid people, I've met bright people. And yes, that all adds, when you're writing, it's a terrific thing to have all these people in your head. And if you read the Clifton Chronicles, I'd like to be Harry. Giles is a combination of several of my friends. Mary is Emma. You can't miss it, Mary is Emma. And my mother is, my mother in the book is my mother. So we all write about what we know about, what we feel. So yeah, a terrific advantage. Although, I say that and then I feel a bit of a fool because Jane Austen didn't get much beyond a small village.
No.
Or much beyond her family. And talk about genius. This woman writes a book about a daughter who wants to get married and a mother who's pushy to get her married. And it's a success. So she writes a book about two girls who want to get married with a pushy mother, and it's a success. So she writes another book about 3 daughters. Why does she get away with it? Because she does it 5 times. Why does she get away with it? Because she's a genius. Because she can make you turn the page. You have to find out what's happening to these human beings. Why? They're all different. That's a God-given gift.
Jeffrey, we have run out of time.
No, we haven't.
One last question from the back. The furthest back, then. The furthest back. And then
Last question, otherwise I'll be bullied out of the brownies. And Dame Carol will personally...
Jeffrey, why did you go to prison? Are you ashamed of what you did?
Yes, of course.
And how did the fragrant Mary react to your time behind bars?
She was terrific. Terrific. We'll take another question.
Yeah, let's take... Haven't been on this side. This lady here in the second row.
The Indian story that you spoke about, the man in the wheelchair, I have read it.
Cast Off.
Sorry?
Which one?
Cast Off.
Cast Off.
Yes.
I have read it, and it's an excellent story. Now, in the list of contents, you put an asterisk to indicate which stories are based on real life.
Which I've picked up in real life,
yes.
and which I've invented myself.
Yes. So, why did you choose to tell which stories you picked up from real life?
Partly because sometimes the real life stories are far more incredible than anything you would dare to make up. And when I get to the end of the story, I think, no one will believe this unless you state that it actually happened. You know, in book 3 of the Clifton Chronicles, when there's an amazing scene where, in the war, where a man does something incredibly brave, I stole the whole story from Sir Tommy Macpherson, a very distinguished soldier, 3 military crosses, 3 Croix de Guerres, and a knighthood by 28. And I put him in the thank yous because I wanted the reader to say, got it, Geoffrey, you didn't make it up. This remarkable human being, age 28, did these things. So sometimes, yes, true life is far stranger than fiction. Can I end by thanking you? You're a disgrace. The last time I spoke to the Jaipur Festival, 7,500 people came to hear me. You are sacked, number one. And Dame Carol, we're looking for a new head of the British Library. This is just good. And Giles,
Yes.
Giles, you're over too. What?
Quality, not quantity.
Yes. Quality.
Yes.
Quality. Can I end by saying, it's been a privilege and always is wherever I go all over the world and see the people who read my books. I realize what an honor it is for a simple storyteller. And I am, Giles, going to go on until I fall.
Well done. Geoffrey Archer, ladies and gentlemen. Well done.
Thank you so much. If you could just join me in thanking Giles Brandreth, Geoffrey Archer, and Dame Carol Black one last time. Thank you so much for being in the Durbar Theatre today.
Thank you.